So, night school.
Night school.
I found this book. It's written by Jonathan Haidt. He's a moral psychologist. The book is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. I've had this book pop up in my recommended books on Amazon before. Never paid attention to it because the title was kind of like, I doubt this guy can explain that subject. It just sounded like clickbaity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, this probably isn't a book about why good people are divided by politics and religion. It's probably just somebody's opinion on something.
I get you.
So I was like, nah, I'm good on that. And it was by an author I've never heard of, and I have so many authors that I'm interested in that I want to read. I'm just like, I don't care about this guy.
I think I have heard of him. I'm pretty sure Peterson talks about him.
Yeah, he was on Peterson's podcast, and he was on Rogan too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. I didn't know that.
So the way that I ended up actually reading it was that I got curious about if there is an established theory about how American liberalism and American conservatism serve as a functional yin and yang and benefit each other rather than work against each other, because it looks to me like they don't contradict. It looks to me like they emphasize different aspects of a cohesive moral system and that both sides of it are necessary.
That they check each other.
Yeah, that that they're checks and balances on each other,
Yeah.
and that there's some complete picture they must paint.
Yeah.
If they could be seen as cooperative partners, and I feel like the more I gain the ability to think about something like a liberal and then think about the same thing like a conservative, the better I understand things, rather than just thinking one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, well, how could one be right and one be wrong? You know, they have to work together. So I Googled, so curious about if anybody had done that before, because I was thinking like, I need to establish a theory of the liberal and conservative yin and yang. Like, I need to do this. This is going to be my life's work, right? So I'm like going through this phase a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So I Google conservative, liberal, yin and yang. And the only material I found was in this book. In chapter 11, he describes how liberalism and conservatism in modern America function as a yin and yang. And I was like,
cool.
Sold. So I ordered it, read the 11th chapter, loved it, but it was built on a lot of ideas that were articulated earlier in the book. And so I was like, damn it, I have to read this whole book now. So started it over, and I love it. It's an ambitious subject. It does a really good job of clarifying the subject for me. It's not some absolute answer or anything, but I really like the guy. He opens up in the book by comparing three philosophical stances, one by Plato, one by Thomas Jefferson, one by philosopher David Hume, who I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
And they're all talking about how they believe morality, Plato is talking about how emotional thinking or intuitive thinking and logic interact. And Plato's description is basically that being completely logical is the answer. That emotions are irrational, logic is rational, we need to conquer the emotions, we need to think rationally.
Okay.
And then in Thomas Jefferson's personal writing, because Thomas Jefferson was like a brilliant, creative, hopeless romantic. And it was really interesting to read some of his writing in here. I don't have time to go into it, but it's really worth looking up Thomas Jefferson's philosophies and poems and stuff.
Cool.
He was really kind of head in the clouds in the way that he wrote sometimes. And in some of his writings, he wrote about how logic and emotions are like co-rulers of the kingdom of his mind. And he tells this story about how he fell in love with this girl on a business trip. And I can't remember the context, but it wasn't something he should pursue logically. And he was just a hopeless romantic, all in on it. And so he wrote about how logic and emotion were trying to co-rule the kingdom of his mind, and they were always combating each other. And then David Hume, on the subject of emotional thinking or intuition and logic, wrote that logic can only serve the passions, that logic is a slave to the passions, that the passions rule, and that all we can do with logic is justify emotional reactions after the fact. So after Jonathan Haidt lays out these three different philosophical stances on that subject, he says that he believes the evidence found by moral psychologists aims to a position closest to David Hume's. That Plato was wrong about the fact that logic is the way that we make decisions, and or make good decisions. That Thomas Jefferson was wrong about the fact that they co-rule, and that David Hume was right about the fact that intuition drives our decisions, and then we use our rationale to justify our intuition after we've already made the intuition in the first place.
Okay. The Jefferson thing is what like rings true to me. So,
Mhm.
but I'm sure you're going to go more into why that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the book is so worth reading because he's so detail oriented in how he presents his stance, and then he explains why he thinks that stance makes sense, and then he'll present like 10 or 20 pieces of evidence and behavioral studies that support the stance.
Mhm.
And so as you read through it, it's really easy to follow his train of thought because he doesn't present an idea without presenting a dozen evidential reasons that he'll assert that idea.
Dope.
So, but one distinction to make between emotional thinking and intuition is that Jonathan Haidt describes emotional thinking as something that is also logical. Like he says that that in the same way, let me think about this. So he describes intuition as sort of just a gut feeling that leads you to want to make a certain decision, but he describes emotions as like biological reactions that happen in reaction to events. And so so Jonathan Haidt doesn't say that intuition and emotions are the same thing. He's like,
Okay.
uh, if you pulled out a dead squirrel right now, I might feel the emotion of disgust, but disgust itself isn't an intuition. But thinking that the squirrel needs to be put into the ground is an intuition that could be traced back to evolutionary patterns.
Okay.
That we understand the best thing that we can do with the dead corpse is put it into the ground.
Okay.
Because then it can't infect us. And so, and maybe subconsciously or somehow we know that that benefits the earth and the
Yeah.
germs of the squirrel and all that crap will go into the trees and
Yeah.
it belongs in there. And the earth will take care of it.
Totally.
So that's an intuitive drive. Put it in the dirt. I'm not necessarily prepared to write a 5-paragraph essay on why squirrels should be put in the dirt, but my intuition says, put that motherfucker in the dirt and get it
Yeah.
out of the studio. But my emotion just says, ugh, gross. So there is a difference between emotion and intuition. He describes it in more detail, but he's not. But David Hume's position doesn't directly contradict Plato because, I mean, it does, but not in the sense that what David Hume calls intuition and what Plato calls emotion are the same thing, because they're not. So Plato is saying, don't let emotional reactions drive your decisions, use logic. But Hume is saying, that's not possible. If you only use logic to make decisions, that doesn't work. You make decisions with intuition, and then you decide whether or not to allow your intuition to make the decision based on logic, or you justify your intuition with the logic.
Okay.
So one example of how you can't make decisions just with logic is Jonathan Haidt describes a case study in which a person has had the aspect of their brain that controls intuition fail completely. And so every decision that they make, they have to entirely consider. They don't just know like, well, this salesman gives me a good gut feeling and this one gives me a bad feeling. He has to sit there and really consider like, okay, this salesman asked me this many questions, this salesman asked me this many questions, and try to logic out every single decision. And the result was that even just like going to the store and picking something to eat, it would just take him forever. So he wasn't able to function.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Haidt also describes a connection between a lessened ability to make decisions based on intuition and autism. That in a sense, autism could be characterized as somebody having a lesser ability to just move based on intuition. Like if you're just smiling and laughing, I just understand. Like we're just smiling and laughing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm on the spectrum, I might have to consider and logic out and spend a little extra time contemplating how I should respond to you, rather than just having
Yeah.
the intuitive gut feeling that makes social interactions go smoothly. Because we're both just making intuitive reactions to each other.
Yeah,
We
that's
don't have to
interesting.
consider them that much, and so I don't have to think like, wait, like right now, if I just logicked out what your face looked like, I'd be like, maybe he's concerned, maybe he's a little irritated.
Right.
But my intuition tells me, usually when he makes that face, it's just he's just interested, he's just listening.
Yeah.
So it's not efficient to not be able to make decisions based on intuition. It is efficient to use intuition. And so the metaphor that Jonathan Haidt formulates to describe the relationship between intuition and logic is an elephant and the rider. So your logic is the rider and your intuition is the elephant. So you, as a human being, are like a rider on an elephant.
Okay.
So your elephant can make intuitive decisions. I don't think I should go to that store. I think I should go to this one. Well, you know that when you have a gut feeling, you have the power to override it.
Yeah.
You can say, like, I'm going to go with my gut on this. Or you can say, I'm going to go against my gut. It's harder to pull your gut in a direction that it doesn't want to go and
Yeah.
say, no, I'm going to go there anyway. I'm going to do that anyway. And there's something that feels kind of synchronistic about just following your gut feeling.
Totally. And if I can, like, justify, like, it definitely is much easier to justify the gut feeling than it is to try and move against it. And then if you can find any little way to make that make sense, any way to make the gut feeling make sense, even if it doesn't make as much sense as the maybe the more logical thing,
Right.
which is against your gut feeling, you're going to go with the gut.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here's something that Jonathan Haidt said about decision making when it comes to your logic analyzing your intuition, is that if you want to believe that something is true, the only question you have to ask is, can I believe that this is true? Can I believe that this is true? Is it possible
Okay.
for me to believe that this is true?
Yeah.
Find a reason. Your logic agrees with your intuition. It feels synchronistic. It's all lined up. My gut
Yeah.
says this. My logic agrees. I have one reason that I could believe it. If you don't want to believe something, then you have to ask, must I believe this?
That's
And
true.
so
Yeah.
almost always the answer to the first question, no matter how stupid it is, the answer to the first question, can I believe this, is yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter how smart the other thing is, do I have to believe it, is no. And so if you see something political in your news feed that you don't like, that makes your intuition feel woozy or whatever, that I don't like this, but they're like presenting solid facts, then you can just pick apart a couple of facts in it and then say, well, this isn't true because of this and this.
Yeah.
And you can just have an argument with what you're seeing in your head. And so you're the prosecutor and you're the judge and you're the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
I decide that I win this argument. I don't have to believe that this is true. So in a situation like that, if your gut feeling tells you, I should go visit my dad, and your logic tells you, well, I don't want to do that because I would rather go on this road trip or whatever, then you could easily tell yourself, like, maybe my gut feeling, oh, wait, wrong example. If your gut feeling tells you, yeah, that you should go to your dad's, and your logic tells you that you want to do something else, like the elephant wants to go hang out with your father, but the logic wants to go do something that you think is fun, then you're just like, well, is it necessary to go visit my dad? And then you can just like, well, I could visit him another time, and it's easy to wave that off. You don't have to fully consider your gut feeling. So you have control as a writer, but there's always the elephant there that seems to guide you in certain directions. And later in the book, which we'll cover in the second episode, because I'm doing this book in 2 chunks, the second chunk is going to get more evolutionary and more political, and this first one is more conceptual. So I'll get into how we form some of those intuitions evolutionarily in the second one.
Cool.
But one of the things that I'm excited to talk about today is, and we were just talking about this off air because I was excited to talk about it because it's strange, is Jonathan Haidt did all these weird experiments with university students where he described strange, immoral situations to them and asked them if they were right or wrong. And when the students said that they were wrong, he asked them to justify why they were wrong, because he wanted to see if they had logical reasons to think that it was wrong, or if they just had an intuition that said it was wrong, whether they could come up with a logical reason or not, to understand the relationship between intuition and logic. So he asked them, here's a situation he described to these college students. Julie and Mark, who are sister and brother, are traveling together in France. They are both on summer vacation from college. One night they are staying alone in a cabin near the beach. They decide that it would be interesting and fun if they tried making love. At the very least, it would be a new experience for each of them. Julie is already taking birth control pills, but Mark uses a condom too, just to be safe. They both enjoy it, but they decide not to do it again. They keep that night as a special secret between them, which makes them feel even closer to each other. So what do you think about this? Was it wrong for them to have sex? So this is a real conversation that he had with one of the subjects.
Okay.
So what do you think about this? Was it wrong for Julie and Mark to have sex? Yeah, I think it's totally wrong to have sex, because I'm pretty religious and I just think incest is wrong anyway, but I don't know. What's wrong with incest, would you say?
When someone says, but I don't know, at
But
the end
I
of
don't
it, it's
know,
like,
yeah.
I have...
But don't hold me accountable to justify this with logic. I just want to say this,
Yeah.
So experimenter, what's wrong with incest, would you say? The whole idea of, well, I've heard, I don't even know if this is true, but in the case, if the girl did get pregnant, the kids become deformed most of the time in cases like that. But they used a condom and birth control pills. Oh, okay, yeah, you did say that. So there's no way they're going to have a kid. Well, I guess the safest sex is abstinence, but I don't know. I just think that's wrong. I don't know. What did you ask me? Was it wrong for them to have sex? Yeah, I think it's wrong. And I'm trying to find out why, what you think is wrong with it. Okay, well, let's see. Let me think about this. How old were they? They were college age, around 20 or so. Oh, looks disappointed, it says in brackets. I don't know. It's just not something you're brought up to do. It's just not, well, I mean, I assume most people aren't. I just think that you shouldn't, I guess my reason is just that you're not brought up to it. You don't see it. It's not, I don't think it's accepted. That's pretty much it. You wouldn't say anything you're not brought up to, you wouldn't say anything you're not brought up to see is wrong, would you? For example, if you're not brought up to see women working outside the home, would you say that it makes it wrong for women to work? Well, oh gosh, this is hard. I really, I mean, there's just no way I could change my mind, but I just don't know how to show what I'm feeling, what I feel about it. It's crazy. And so, even though it's universally agreed that that's wrong, you don't have to have a case ready to be confident that it's wrong, because it's sewn so deep into your intuition that that's wrong, that you just know that it's wrong. And so, it's an example of the idea that we make moral decisions based on intuition. And later on, see if I can find it real quick, they did this. They added this part where they would give people a really bad and a really good argument for why incest was okay in the situation, and so, and then allow them to make the decision again. And so the bad reason was just like, well, they were doing it to rebel against their parents because their parents were tyrannical or like some stupid like that. And then the good reason was, well, we evolutionarily evolved to avoid incest in order to create more healthy offspring, because incest created genetic mutations, but now that we have birth control, there's nothing wrong with incest anymore. And whether they gave a bad or good argument in favor of incest, the people were no more or less likely to change their mind.
Interesting.
They were just decided that's not it, dude. Let's just not do that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know how much follow-up conversation there is on that. It's just,
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. It is hard to come up with something
it is, yeah.
really solid.
I mean, I can formulate a good argument for why incest is wrong. I could talk about the benefit of people having social networks, some of which exclude sex, and a very
Yeah.
small amount of which includes sex, and how you need to have that whole array of social relationships to have a fully healthy life. Or, I could make the argument, obviously, because I don't think incest is okay. But even if I did do that, I would still only be doing that because I intuitively know that incest is wrong. I wouldn't be
Right.
doing that because I logically know that incest is wrong. It's just one of those things that,
Yeah, if you start from zero, if you start from no assumption either way, then it is hard to get to that it is wrong.
right.
But yeah, I mean, obviously it is, because
Well,
it's unhealthy
I
to.
disagree with that too. I think that if you asked an alien or a psychopath or something, like, okay, here's all the evidence. Like, here's all the evidence that people involved in incest are unhealthy. Here's all the examples of healthy incestual relationships, which there would be very few of. There'd be some weird anomaly or whatever, like this
Maybe.
story, and then there'd be all of these examples where incest was tied to all these other unhealthy things. And see, I'm speaking from intuition right now.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think that if you looked at the evidence on both sides, you would still conclude that society is better off banishing it. But whether you agree with that or not, the point is, the reason we think it's wrong is intuitive. It's not, we didn't lay out the evidence and then
Yeah.
say this. And I think it's worth considering when a lot of boundaries are being challenged and questioned right now about a lot of things. I think it's worth considering where we get our morality from, because when people say well, intuitively we've always said that this is wrong, but logically for this reason it's okay. It's like, okay, so now with every issue we have to break down all of the evidence for or against on everything and re-decide what's right or wrong, because there is there's a lot of moral revolutions going on in the world right now. many of which are good, some of which are bad.
Sure.
So there's so another thing worth considering about, actually, I just mentioned psychopaths, so let's go into psychopaths. So
Sure.
he talks about psychopaths and babies when it comes to the rider and elephant metaphor, because psychopaths are a rider with no elephant, and babies are an elephant with no rider. And so they're extreme examples that show,
Psychopaths are a rider with no elephant.
yes,
Okay.
and babies are elephants with no rider. So psychopaths can feel some feelings and emotions. There was one quote in the book where a psychopath was being interviewed, and he was asked, so do you just not feel anything? And he said, oh, no, I'm not a robot. I get real riled up when I get into a fight or when I have sex. Making a great case for yourself,
I'm
dude.
pretty sure a robot would. I think so.
I mean, yeah, have you programmed it to have boop boop chemicals when that happens?
Yeah.
But dude, for repping psychopaths really well. But so they feel some feelings and emotions, but they don't feel embarrassment, they don't feel compassion, they don't feel shame. So they don't feel emotions that are directly tied to their social network with other people.
They don't feel emotions that are tied to other people's opinion of them, it sounds like.
Yeah, or other people's experience of reality. Like you're experiencing an unpleasant reality.
Right.
There's just not a connection
Gotcha.
to that. And all of that shit is in the elephant, because it's not directly logical. Like, if you feel sad, then I should too.
So is a psychopath just someone completely lacking empathy?
Lacking emotions that relate to their ability to relate with other people. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, empathy, being able to relate with other people. Yeah, but they're also lacking shame and embarrassment, which is purely individual.
True.
So
Yeah.
there was one story. But shame and embarrassment are also connected with the ability to relate with other people, because I want to relate with you and you not see me in a way that is shameful. Like, I don't want you to shame me.
Right.
They don't care. So it's
Okay.
not just your ability to empathize with them. It's also emotions that are generally inflicted on you by your experience with other people. And there's one story in the book where this guy is a psychopath, being interviewed in prison or wherever the hell he ended up. He broke into somebody's house, and the guy walked down the stairs, and the guy was making too much noise, and it annoyed the psychopath, and so he shot the dude. And then he got hungry, and so he started eating the guy's snacks, drank a couple of the guy's beers, sat down, watched his TV, fell asleep, and the cops showed up and arrested him, asleep on the couch. So
Wow.
not only did he not have the empathy necessary to not shoot the man for no reason,
Yeah.
he also didn't have the shame or embarrassment trigger to get him out of the house. Like,
Or yeah, not even fear of being arrested?
but psychopaths can feel fear, but I think that a lot of us in a situation like that would really be let out of the house by the fact that we didn't want to go through the experience of being convicted of a violent crime and having all of our family and friends know, and then all of that part. Like, the whole social thing would normally be tied up in it.
Yeah.
And for him, it's just a matter of like, well, what are the odds, that someone's going to show up?
Right.
It's just like 50-50, fuck it, I'm going to watch TV. It's not like heart pounding, like, oh my God, my whole reputation is in jeopardy. I've done something awful. Will God ever forgive me? Like, there's just not all of that.
Right.
So, and then babies, they have intuition. And he talks about Piaget, who Jordan Peterson talks about a lot too. Piaget wrote,
Morality of the child or something like that?
yeah, morality and the play of children or something.
Yeah.
So Piaget did all these experiments where, I don't think it's called an experiment. I think it's called something else. But he just observed really young children playing and watched morality emerge in their play. Oh, you ripped you off, and then you accused you, and then you ignored, but then you punished, and then you apologized, and then you forgave, and then you shared. And he just watched morality emerge in the play of children, and theorized that children were born as a blank slate, and they learned morality in their experiences with other children. That they just intuitively figured it out,
Okay.
but weren't intuitively pre-programmed to understand those sorts of moralities.
Okay.
And Jonathan Haidt says that Piaget was wrong about that, which Jordan Peterson says too, that people do have evolutionarily programmed intuitions that they're born with, and then throughout life they develop them, practice them, add to them, have the choice whether to apply them or not, have the choice where to emphasize their morality, end up a liberal or a conservative or whatever, but they're born with a certain set of intuitions. Yet they don't have the self-control to choose whether or not to express those intuitions. And so a 1-year-old pissed is just a pure ball of anger. So
Okay.
so Skyly, she's 3 now, our niece. I was hanging out with Skyly and our sister Courtney yesterday, and Skyly was mad because she was giving me grass and pretending it was food. She would pluck out some grass and say food time, and then she'd give me the food. I'd take the food, throw it on the ground. She'd go pick more grass. Did that a few times, and then I went inside and she brought in a handful of grass, and I was like, no, you got to throw it outside, and she understood, but she didn't want to. She was like, it's food time, like I'm not throwing it outside.
Do the bit. You
Right.
got to do it.
So instead of doing the bit, I picked her up, brought her outside, and did this, scraped the grass out of her hands and threw it on the ground, and then she went from pure joy to pure rage, and just threw herself on the ground, for like 20 seconds, and then she was angrily crawling the chair to get to Courtney, her mom, and decided halfway through that she was playfully crawling the chair, and then she was joy again. And there wasn't really a just like, hey, I don't need to overreact. Like there's just not that. No, I don't need to overreact to this. I can just hold back my anger. When children are super, super young, they don't have the writer that can say, I feel this intuition, what am I going to do with it? They just the intuition out. They just barf it out. They just
react super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then psychopaths, they can logic everything out. And you could tell a psychopath, hey, this is what emotion is like. And psychopaths can learn how emotions work, but they still don't feel them. So they could still make decisions, and they could even make decisions based on information they've collected about emotion, but they don't have the intuition within them.
If they were really clever, they would be able to integrate emotional responses as though they really had them.
Right. And
based on how they understand they work.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there was one serial killer that was talked about in this book. I can't remember one of the famous ones. What are the famous fucking serial killers that Kalia watches? Yes, that's the one. So Ted Bundy, I don't watch that shit, but Ted Bundy, he volunteered on a suicide hotline in college.
Weird.
And learned, I think it was in college. I got to be butchering some aspect of this story, unfortunately, but it's a famous serial killer who volunteered on a suicide hotline for an extended period of time to learn how women worked and their emotions so that he could better manipulate them and kidnap them and blah, blah, blah. So he was intellectually capable of understanding emotion and utilizing emotion, but he still didn't have the intuition to tell him what I'm doing is wrong. He's just, I don't know, like, kill this person, like, just have fun killing this person. What's wrong with this? There's just not that tuned in. So
the suicide hotline thing's crazy.
Isn't that?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That someone would do that.
Yeah, it's fucked up. So this whole framework of thinking about intuition, it has made me think a lot about how we have arguments with each other, like how we talk to each other, because
as in people in general, or you and me specifically?
No, just people in general, because so Jonathan Haidt describes that the writer functions kind of like a press secretary that will aim to justify whatever you do or say. That can be the writer's first instinct. It depends on your level of personal integrity and how much time you've put into disciplining yourself to be honest even when it doesn't benefit you. But if you haven't put any intentional effort into being honest even when it doesn't benefit you, your writer is just a press secretary. It's just whatever you do, whatever you say, the writer is just coming up with reasons that it's okay.
Spin.
Yeah.
Just spinning.
Just spin everything. Just spin everything whatever everyone else says, spin everything that you say. And so Jonathan Haidt brings up an example where he's talking to his wife, and she says, "Why didn't you do the dishes?" And he instantly remembered that their child had done something that day, and he's like, "Oh, I got distracted by blah, 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 blah." And then an hour later, he was like, "That had nothing to do with the dishes. She just asked why I didn't do the dishes, and I just spit something out. I just said something." And
listed a different problem from his day
Yeah.
to justify that he had other stuff going on.
Right. Instantly and unconsciously and effortlessly. Within a second, he had already responded. Oh, so and so with the kid, you know. And so making excuses
Yeah.
is an example of the writer being a press secretary for the elephant, because really he was just going about his day in a way that was lazy and unintentional,
Right.
and he didn't get to it. And the elephant drove him to the TV to consume content or to the computer to type something he wanted to do or whatever, and he's just wandering about his day and didn't intentionally do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then afterwards the writer is just like, well, let me tell you, the elephant had to blah 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 because because of the baby and all this. And so when we get into arguments with people that we fundamentally disagree with, like what are we even doing? Because I'm just trying to justify what I believe, and you're just trying to justify what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it even mean to have a substantive discussion that starts with a fundamental disagreement? Like, how can you even do that?
I mean, I guess if the people are both honest, then that can still be a substantive conversation, and it can still get them somewhere if they're both willing to be honest about, I guess, whatever they're talking about. But it's when people are willing to bullshit the reasons and spin. I guess if they're spinning is when it becomes a problem. But
Yeah.
maybe everyone's kind of doing that.
That's what I'm thinking, is that almost everybody is at least doing that to some extent. And so even
Yeah, I mean,
even if it's my intention to understand your position and
Mhm.
represent my position honestly, how effective am I in holding myself to that level of integrity when we're capable of spinning unconsciously? Because he didn't
Right.
notice that he lied to his wife until an hour later.
Right.
And he's a moral psychologist, so he's thinking about that sort of thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of us that haven't made an intentional effort to specifically think about that, am I just justifying myself or am I being truthful? Because
Right.
that's an extremely nuanced thing to even consider, let alone put into practice, let alone effectively, let alone consistently.
Yeah, totally. Even acknowledging that you could be doing that there could be one aspect of you that is
Right.
not being honest, even though most of you is an honest person. The idea of that kind of separation is kind of abstract for a lot of people, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an abstract idea. So you said something, but you didn't notice that you were lying.
Yeah.
It's like, pretty sure I know when I'm lying and telling the truth, dude. That sky's yellow, lie. Sky's blue, true. Like,
Right.
but it gets especially nuanced when you can bring up justifications for your intuitions that are true and factual and valid and falsely representative of the truth. That you can just bring up one idea. You can just be like, well, I hate this person because he said this, in this year. And everything that you said was true. Everything you said was valid. But you're just looking, your level of analysis of the subject is zoomed in to just the piece of the subject that validates your intuition.
Right.
Like if we were judging a politician and we looked at a 50-year career of politics or otherwise and politics or whatever,
Mhm.
and then we said, well, here in this year, here in this year, and here in this year, they did incredibly generous things. It's like, and then you're going to tell me that I'm lying? It's like, but I'm not lying. Yeah, but
What
I
that you're
am.
lying about.
That I'm lying when I say that this politician did a great thing 20 years ago, a great thing 10 years ago, and a great thing 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And I say, politician did 3 great things. Therefore, politician is great.
Okay.
Politician did 3 great things. Politician is great. That's my evidence. That's my conclusion, and I'm
Mhm.
being truthful. And then for you to tell me that I'm lying, how could I wrap my head around the fact that I'm lying in that moment? But I am, because my intuition, based on my unconscious assumptions,
Mhm.
told me that politician was great. And then I searched for reasons after the fact to justify that politician was great.
Right.
And then I only analyzed aspects of politician's career that were great, and then I listed those to you, and then I said that made my conclusion. But that's not even how I came to my conclusion.
Right.
That's how I justified my conclusion. So I am lying.
It's like thinking dishonestly.
Yeah. And
It's a thought lie.
I think you could call it intellectual dishonesty. Like, you're not being intellectually honest.
Yeah.
Like, your intellectual process is not being conducted with integrity.
Yeah, just like inside it, like in your head, the lie is happening, and then you're saying something. Because if you believe something to be true, it isn't a lie. exactly, because it's not a lie is something that you do, like something you choose to do, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So it could very easily seem like you're not lying, but the lie already
Right.
happened, and it's just
Right.
that the total you isn't aware that part of you lied to the other part of you to trick the total you into
Right.
believing something that isn't so.
Yeah. So I think the way that we can convince ourselves to take this idea seriously is by reconsidering how we think about the concept of a lie, or more accurately, how we consider the concept of honesty. Because
Okay.
it seems like honesty just sounds like if you don't intentionally say things that are untrue, you are an honest person. But that's not true. Honesty is a skill, and it's
Hmm.
a skill that involves nuanced knowledge about the way that you work, and self-awareness is another skill. So it's something that you have to practice, cultivate, and commit yourself to.
Okay.
And then to have the self-awareness to understand the way that you process ideas so that you even understand how to be more honest. Then you have to have the skill of being the skill and I guess the quality, but quality sounds moralistic. And I think this is a skill too, is the idea of being self-sacrificial,
Hmm.
understanding how to throw yourself under the bus in service of truth. And I don't mean that in a moralistic way, like be a better person. I mean, like, understand how it is actually more effective in the long term to be self sacrificial in service of honesty.
Yeah.
I just think it's a better strategy if you're playing a long game, which we are. We live 80 years.
Yeah.
So I think the way that I'm going to convince myself to be a more honest person is by not thinking about lies as something intentional and honesty as something easy, but lying as something easy and honesty as something intentional and something that has to be practiced.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You feel me?
Yeah. So there's kind of a difference, like not lying is being not dishonest, but that doesn't
Yeah, but that's
equal
not being
honest.
honest.
Yeah.
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 Because if you behave effortlessly, if you behave without intention, you're going to be dishonest. Like that's in your nature. It's in your biological nature to be dishonest. You have
Hmm.
intuitions that you want to justify, and you want to justify them to protect yourself. And you've already practiced for generations protecting yourself by justifying whatever you believe
Yeah.
to protect yourself against attacks by foreign ideas or foreign threats or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if you don't try, you're a fucking liar. You know, you're not honest. Like, well, I never try to lie. I never try to go out of my way to be dishonest. I'm a pretty honest person. No, if you're not trying to be honest, you are probably an impulsive liar. I'm definitely an impulsive liar. Just little things, that I just, my boss is like, oh, where's your screwdriver? And I'm just like, oh, I think I might have left it over there. No, I know for a fact that I left it over there, and
Yeah.
I did it because I
Yeah.
was smoking a cigarette when I was supposed to be working.
Yeah.
But I'm just, how could I reword this real quick on the way out so that it protects me a little bit from punishment
Yeah.
or from whatever it is. And so it's effortless. It's programmed into us.
Yeah.
You're a lawyer and you're the client and you lawyer for yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And that's your job. So you just lie your ass off.
Yeah. I mean it. I guess I don't know for sure if that's the case for everybody, but that feels true about me. That like
Mm-hmm.
definitely like going. Sometimes you have to like when I'm thinking about how I want to approach a situation. Oftentimes, like just straight up telling the truth isn't like the natural thing.
Right.
And then a lot of times I'll think like I don't want to lie, but I also don't want to give just the raw version of what I did and why I did it. I want there to be like a slightly different,
Right.
just a slightly different twist on my motivations to make me look a little bit better. But I
Yeah.
don't want to tell a lie.
Yeah.
But like that's
But
still
lawyers operate the same way. Like you sit down with a lawyer and you give them your case, and if you're giving a case to make somebody else look bad, then they're like, okay, like which aspects of this make them look the worst, and in what order could I present them so that it makes them look as bad as possible?
hmm
And if it's a defense attorney, same thing. They sit you down. They're like, all right, tell me everything. You tell them everything. They're like, well, I'm gonna sort out that part because it makes you look bad and we don't have to say it. And then I'm gonna sort in this part because it makes you look good and we can say it.
hmm
And so then, well, if I say it in this order, it'll make you look like a better person, like you were more reasonable. And so we just do that automatically,
yeah.
you know. So So shifting from talking about intentional honesty to talking about how we have conversations with people that we disagree with and how we make friends and influence people. So he
Okay.
references Carnegie a few times in this book too.
Oh, nice.
He's got this David Hume quote. It sounds all fluffy and philosophy, but I'll break it down. And as reasoning is not the source, and this is about two people having a conversation trying to change each other's minds,
Okay.
and what's not going to work and what might. And as reasoning is not the source, whence either disputant derives his tenets. So that's saying, and since reason is not the source from which either person derived their position,
Okay.
you know,
Meaning like emotion or intuition is.
he uses the word affections, which is
Okay.
a different word that I don't completely understand.
Okay.
And as reasoning is not the source whence either disputant derives his tenets, it is in vain to expect that any logic which speaks not to the affections will ever engage him to embrace sounder principles. So, and as reasoning is not the source whence either disputant derives his tenets. So he's saying, since neither person in the argument got their shit from logic,
Yeah.
it is in vain to expect that any logic which speaks not to the affections. So it's stupid to think that any reasoning that doesn't speak to their intuition.
True. Yeah.
Affections is like, an affect is like an emotional expression. And so I think that affect in the context of psychology means like emotion driven reactions that we give to things and then how we express them, something like that. David Hume might have been using it differently though, so I'm just going to have to say I'm stupid on this one. Which speaks not to the,
yeah.
huh?
But we get the gist of what that sentence means at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
You know what I thought you said just now? I thought you said, but you're stupid, which I actually liked better. So, which speaks not to the affections will ever engage him to embrace sounder principles. So if you want to get somebody to think about things that are more noble and more sound and better and influence them in a positive way, you can't speak to them in a way that is purely logical without appealing to their intuition, because they didn't get their positions from intuition or from logic in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that I shouldn't vote liberal, I should vote conservative, and then you're giving me your whole internal lawyer case for how you justify voting conservative, and you think that logic is going to get me to switch from voting liberal to voting conservative, it's not, because I didn't choose.
The wrong battle.
You're fighting the wrong battle,
Yeah.
or you're fighting the battle with the wrong weapons. But it is almost completely the wrong battle, because the logic thing is a battle. I can logic my position, you can logic yours, and we can see who logic's better. So we can have a debate, and Evan can watch as a moderate and decide which one of us did better,
Yeah.
and which one of us he's more likely to side with. But between us, it's not going to change anything. So that battle is about leading by example. So the way that you actually get people to modify their intuitive reactions to things or their moral positions on things is to lead by example, be likable, and believe what you believe. And this is going to lead into Jonathan Haidt's concept of the matrix, which I'm stoked about. So he grew up super liberal, went to all liberal universities, liberal parents, da-da-da, decided to study moral psychology, took a trip to India. In India, he lived in a super conservative community that was like the men were the leaders, the women quietly served food, and there was a lot of things that worked in a way that was very hierarchical, very authority valuing, and patriarchal, and so his liberal intuition was uncomfortable with it. But at the same time, the people were extremely kind and extremely warm to him. The men and the women, everybody was so kind to him and so cool and so welcoming and wanted him to get as much as he could and learn as much as he could from the experience. And so as he existed in that community and enjoyed himself and liked the people that he was with, he gradually opened his mind to the idea that those people are just as moral and just as sincere as the people in the liberal culture that he grew up with. So then after telling that story, he talks about moral matrices, and that you're living in a moral matrix when you assume that somebody who has a different set of morals is like, if you categorize moral systems into teams, and you feel the need to justify why your team is right and another major team is wrong, then you're living in a moral matrix in the sense that you're not aware that their reality actually exists. You think your reality exists and theirs doesn't. And
Okay.
so whatever they do, whatever they say, it's invalid, it's wrong. You stack up all the evidence to think the other side is wrong, my side is right. And so he says that his moral matrix was broken when he experienced a culture that was radically conservative compared to his own, but was also full of happy, healthy people and was kind to him and was cool. And let me see. He said there's this really cool quote that he talked about after he had that experience in India. He said, I felt so good when I wasn't angry anymore, when my righteous anger was gone. And when my righteous anger went away, I no longer felt the need to say, we are right, they are wrong. And that felt like a sort of awakening. And I have felt the same way several times, honestly, because our dad was fairly conservative, and then my adoptive family was liberal, and then after reconnecting with my dad as an adult, then I leaned more conservative. And so I've gone through it several times of I've awakened now. Like now I know, the reality is really like this. Oh, reality is really like this. But it wasn't really an awakening until I realized, whoa, both of these moral systems are actually valid. Like both of these people are completely sincere.
Yeah,
both
they can both work.
Yeah, both of these moral systems include people who have good intentions and are sincere about what they believe.
Yeah.
And they have different benefits that are real. So let's see. So when it comes to changing minds and leading by example, I picture like a big field of elephants where with riders on them, where the riders are steering the elephants. And so the elephants tend to go in a certain direction, or like a certain stream of elephants with an elephant tends to follow a certain stream where we all tend to emphasize this aspect of morality. And so we're going to move this way. And then the rider has control, but he's comfortable because he's happy in his environment. And so he's just going with that stream of elephants, and he's fine with it. The rider could switch that elephant to another stream if it wanted to, but if the rider doesn't want to, stay in that stream. Well, the elephant and the rider are more likely to stay in their stream if they're having a pleasant experience there. And if you talk to, like using kids who grew up in an LDS family, for example, if you talk to LDS kids who got along with their families really well, most of them just stay in the culture. Even if they know they don't agree with all of it, they're like, well, I've always had a good experience in this culture. I grew up, I had a good life, I had a good family, I had good friends, I had sports, everything's been good.
Yeah, very true.
So I stayed here.
Yeah.
And then if you talk to kids that chose to leave the LDS church, a lot of them had a negative experience. And so it's not, there's plenty of people who are members of the LDS church who, if you really get down in a deep conversation with them, don't agree with a lot of it. But they don't leave, because they're fine there.
Yeah.
So they're just staying in that stream. Like, even if they could say, well, the Joseph Smith thing actually might be a little silly. And, he had all these girlfriends and the story's weird. I get it. It's like, but that's the foundation for your whole faith. But it's not the foundation for their whole faith. The experience that they have with their family and friends is the foundation for their whole
family.
faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Joseph Smith, even if they think that part of it is silly. But if you talk to an LDS missionary, they would tell you that the foundation is these revelations by Joseph Smith. He talked to an angel, the light struck his head. This is what all of our faith is based on. This is the true testament, da-da-da. But that's not the foundation for your faith. You don't wake up every morning and just remember Joseph Smith, You wake up in the morning and remember your family and friends.
Yeah.
That's what keeps you where you are.
It's just good living.
Right. They're living good. They're doing good. Why would they leave?
Yeah.
And then kids who didn't get along with their parents, they'll leave and they'll go enter a different moral matrix. And so they're like, no, I'm liberal, expressing myself with tattoos and blue hair and all of these things. Like, this is true enlightenment. This is true, liberation. This is my morality. They're now in a different moral matrix than their parents. And so maybe they can't even have a conversation with their parents. But it's not that they were just so logical about morality and so logical about the problems with the LDS church that they decided they needed to leave, and they calculated the what was right about their faith and what was right about this other moral matrix before they switched. They didn't do all the math, you know. They just, well, I didn't get along with my parents and I didn't have a pleasant experience there, so I left. And then I justified it by listing all of these reasons that Mormon dogmas are irrational from my perspective. But it's not really why you took off. So I think to have a moral matrix that is as inclusive and as sound and as rational and as fair as possible, we should seek out to understand how other moral cultures operate, not just operate in whatever culture is convenient to us and then justify the morals after the fact.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
But if you look at typical human behavior, it would look like those elephants with the riders on them, they're all wandering around. And so if you want that elephant over there to try out your stream, then the best thing that you can do is just do what you're doing and do it well. Because if they start looking around for another stream, they're going to see you living your best life and they're going to come try your stream out. But if you go over to their stream and tell them that their stream is wrong, you're going to startle the fuck out of the elephant, and the rider is going to pick up a spear, you know, and it's just going to be a disaster. And so it brings me a lot of peace of mind to know, as a Christian, for example, thinking that my life is better because I do my best to model my morality after this person who I think was good. Well, if I think that that would be better in more people's life, then the best thing that I can do is just do that the best I can.
Yeah.
Not go to people and say, hey, you should believe what I believe. Here's the reasons. You know, that doesn't work, because people don't make their decisions about what moral matrix they're going to exist in based on reasons.
Yeah.
They do it based on their experience.
Yeah.
And when they're shopping for something new, you know, something's missing, I need new direction, I need guidance in life or whatever, we go on YouTube, we like motivation or whatever. You know, we like go looking for something. We go shopping. And we go shopping for a moral matrix, and then we land somewhere that's pleasant to us. So I think Carnegie would dig that. A couple more things to touch on. In high school, me and my class did a test that tested us for like implicit racism, like subconscious racism.
Yeah.
So it would be like a picture of a black guy and then a picture of a white guy and then a picture of a dog. It was like all these different pictures, and like you'd have to say whether the picture was good or bad, and you have to like click the button in a certain amount of seconds or something so that it was fast enough that the decision could be made subconsciously but not rationally. And the point of the test was to reveal to us that we did have subconscious biases against minorities, and so or reveal whether we did. Some people did, some people didn't. I think I had an unconscious bias against black people or something, and so I was like, okay, I guess, you know, like I was curious about it, but at the same time it was like, well, but aren't I capable of overriding that? You know, like
Yeah, of course.
aren't I, like, it's a good point, but something that has got me thinking after reading this book is that knowing that you have an implicit bias against people of a different race than yours, it's good to know, and you should consider it so that you can treat people more fairly. But I don't think that it's fair to say that, like, if I have an implicit bias against black people, that I'm racist, it's irrational, and it's bad. Because if you go back far enough into our evolutionary history to the point that interacting with a new culture was genuinely dangerous, we have evolved that intuition for a reason. And so I think like part of the problem about the conversation about race is that it's like check your biases, be a better person, all this. It's kind of like this attack, right? It's just like, yeah, of course I have biases, and of course I need to check them. But telling people you have biases, you're bad, check them, doesn't work. Or like forcing people to, right? It's not effective. And I also don't think that the left, and the left is doing way more advocacy about that subject, like that subject of implicit bias. Now the race conversation is all over the place, but now it's a whole thing. But But generally, the left would be the ones to say, like, hey, let's look at our implicit biases. Like, what are our subconscious biases and how can we work on them?
Yeah.
I don't think the left does that anymore in like a constructive way. But like props to them, they're more likely to do that than the right, I think. But something I think that's left out of the conversation is that there was a certain point where that intuition was useful. Like we developed that for a reason. Like if you were a Native American and a white European showed up and you were like, fuck this, I don't have a good feeling about this.
Right.
You know, you were dead right.
Well, but I'm sure that there were conservative Native Americans that were like, no, fuck this. We don't know these people and we don't know what this is going to be.
Right.
And then there were liberal Native Americans that were like, well, we're all basically the same under the Allbaker.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think it's always kind of been like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think so my point isn't that we shouldn't consider racial biases. My point that as liberals, if we want people to pay attention to the fact that we should have racial biases, we should be intellectually honest about the fact that they were built into our intuition for a reason. Like, hey, part of us should be weary of outsiders. Part of us should be accepting towards outsiders. We should
Yeah.
have both.
Yin and
We should
yang.
definitely hold it right here and just judge outsiders the same way that we judge ourselves and just be like, well, what are they doing? You know, do they seem honest? Are they communicating with us honestly? Are they, and this is theoretically if we were a tribe, right? Which we aren't anymore. But the fact that people have racism built into them is not completely irrational. It served us a lot more earlier in our evolutionary history than it does now. Because now, you know, we live on a planet, not on a piece of dirt.
Yeah.
And
We have much
so-
more awareness of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have to be different. But there's also like liberals, like if you say a negative trait that a minority has, you know, that's
Yeah.
that's racist. And it's like, no, but it's not. Like
Yeah.
white people have negative traits, black people have negative traits, Asian people have negative traits. People, if our cultures differ, then we have pros and cons in our culture. And so it got me thinking about that test, how there was conservative Native Americans who said, yo, these white people, you know, I'm not sure about them. And they
Yeah.
were completely right. And so I think that could help that conversation happen more constructively. Like, hey, you have biases. We developed those for a reason. I'm not saying like you're a bad person, but just like consider the function. What is the function of that bias? If your son goes and gets a girlfriend, then you shouldn't just accept that girlfriend just with no check, you know. You should be like, well, who the hell is this girl? What does she do with herself? What's her family like?
Yeah.
What's her behavior like? Is she honest? You shouldn't just accept anybody in with open arms. Or you could say it about immigration. Like if there's people migrating, it's like there's pros and cons to migration.
Yeah.
Pros and cons specific to one culture when it comes to migration. What are the pros? What are the cons? So let's look at them. Let's not like think that you're either racist or 100% welcoming, because that's just not the reality of how we make decisions about morality. You know?
Yeah.
So I've been talking a lot about emphasizing different aspects of morality. So I need to get to, and this should be the last thing I think, the 6 moral flavors that Haidt talks about. So he opens this book up. This is clowning. So he talks about a restaurant that only serves syrups. It only serves sweet syrups. And the point of the restaurant only serving sweet syrups is that sweetness is the receptor or whatever it's called in the taste buds that creates the most immediate positive reaction. And so let's cut the fat and let's just serve only sweet syrups. And how
Okay.
nobody goes to that restaurant because it's stupid.
Yeah.
Because even though sweetness is the most effective or most powerful or whatever taste receptor, there's like 6 different aspects of our taste buds. There's the salty and the sweet, and I don't fucking remember all of them. But he's saying that there were a lot of philosophers throughout history that would choose one aspect of morality and then try to boil all morality down to it and say the most common one is everything comes down to harm. Like, don't harm. So everything comes down to harm and fairness. If it's fair and it doesn't harm anyone, it's fine.
Mhm.
If it harms anyone, it's bad. All morality can be boiled down to that. And on the surface, it's like, yeah, that is really the point of morality, you know, is to not harm people. But then when you start picking apart, it doesn't work. Because in the example where the brother and sister
Mhm.
banged and birth control and condoms and da-da-da, nobody got harmed and nobody found out about it, then with that model, you could say, well, that was fine, and it's not. Or there was one example where a vegetarian woman working at a morgue is told to throw away a dead body and eats it instead because she doesn't want to be wasteful of meat. And so, but you still say, humans eating humans is wrong. But, well, if she cooked the meat effectively and there was no negative impact on her health and the guy was already dead and it was already going to go to waste and no harm was done to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a full picture of morality, because there are aspects of morality that are about sacredness and decency too. And so if you accept the idea that we make decisions intuitively about morality and justify them with rationality after the fact, you should also consider the idea that we still have morals we practice that we can't justify rationally, even though they're right. We just don't know why they're right yet. So your gut could tell you to do something, and you could follow, and it could turn out that it was right, but you didn't know why it was right when you followed it. And so another example is a bunch of people were asked if they'd sell their soul for $2. And the contract said, this is not a real contract. This is a psychology experiment. This is not a binding agreement. 20% would sign it. So maybe there is something about the soul that we understand intuitively but not rationally. So we know intuitively that it's wrong to sell your soul, even symbolically, even if it's not real. But we don't know rationally how to justify that that is true. If we make intuitive decisions before logic, we might still have intuitively based morals that we still can't justify logically. We still don't understand why we're doing them.
Do you think it might be the case that, like, because earlier you mentioned a sort of a disagreement between Piaget and Haidt, that Piaget thinks that all morality is learned, kids are a blank slate, you learn morality, and that Haidt thinks that that's not the case and that it's something innate in you that you're born with. Is it possible that, like, because the, like, the harming and fairness aspect, is it possible that that is innate, and that this other stuff where it's like it's more spiritual, it's more like that just feels wrong in a way that I can't explain, that maybe that is more learned through culture, and that, like, something like thinking incest and cannibalism are wrong is not something that you innately know, but rather something that's, like, learned?
Possibly.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the 6 moralities right now. And in 2 weeks, when we do the second episode, I'll answer that question.
Okay.
Haidt talks about the fact that there's a lot of evolutionary psychologists who have tried to justify the evolutionary development of all of these morals, but there's a logical fallacy in their approach where they take a morality and then they just make up an evolutionary story that hypothetically could justify that morality without proving that the evolutionary development actually led to that morality. And then he takes a different approach and uses his approach to describe how each of these 6 aspects of morality did arise through evolution, and I didn't understand it.
Okay.
So I'll read it again, and then we'll talk about it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's those 6 moralities: care and harm, fairness and cheating, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, and sanctity and degradation. So,
was that 5?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is 5. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was 5 taste receptors and 5 moralities.
Okay.
Yeah, I was tripping on that. So, I can tell you that sanctity and degradation, part of the evolutionary explanation that Haidt provides for that, is that we have developed the disgust affect or emotion to protect ourselves against things that are potentially harmful. And actually, as I talk about it, I'm remembering the story. So we're omnivores. We can eat plants and we can eat meat. And what that means, a pro of that is that we can go anywhere on Earth and we can find something to eat.
Yeah.
If we just find fruits, just find vegetables, just find meats, just find beans, whatever, we'll wing it, we'll make it work because we can eat whatever. But a con of that is that we've developed overactive disgust reactions because we've had to be so careful about what's going to poison us and what's not, because our food selection is so broad that we have an extremely present and active disgust response. So you should have a disgust reaction if you come across something that, if eaten, would kill you.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah.
And then, of course, plants can also evolve to make something taste good and kill you. And we're always in that biological interaction with our environment.
Yeah.
But that's one explanation of how the disgust feature has become so present in us that people will feel disgust. Like, for example, with racism, there's a lot of people who are racist because they have an overactive disgust reaction to anything that's different.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you break down the emotional reaction of some people who are having throwing a racist fit about something, it's a disgust reaction.
Yeah.
And if you look at the rants that Hitler went on personally, he was constantly talking about disgust. He's constantly disgusted.
I've heard
He was
that.
disgusted by the Jews. They were rats. They were all these. Like, he wasn't making rational arguments about Jews having a negative impact on society. He wasn't angry. He was disgusted. And it's
Okay.
just like this
Yeah, I've heard that.
this overactive emotional reaction in him that led him to do hateful things. And so there's a lot of that at the root of racism. That's just like, that's different. Ugh. But the evolutionary history behind that is that we've had to develop that overactive disgust reaction because we needed it, because our food supply was so broad that our ability to detect what was safe and what wasn't had to be so advanced that we now have that kind of hangover, that even though we now consciously know what we can eat and what we can't, we still have that emotional reaction built up inside of us that something different can just make us go, oh, get it away, death. It looks like death.
Makes sense.
And some
Yeah.
people really, they'll look at a minority and they think, that's death. They're going to kill me. They're going to ruin my society. They're going to all of this. And it's just this irrational disgust reaction coming out. And so you could say that disgust affect is the explanation for why someone would say, another example from the book, somebody buys a frozen chicken, has sex with it, and then cooks it and then eats it. People almost unanimously say that's morally wrong. It could be a disgust reaction. Don't put your dick in an animal. That's a really smart intuition for human beings to develop.
It's good policy.
If you put your dick in an animal, then something gross might happen and that might harm you. It's disgusting. Just don't do it. You don't have but it would be so inefficient to logic that out every single time, right? Like, if I put my dick in this animal, I might get a disease. If I get a disease, what are the odds I'm going to have access to medicine to treat that disease? What if that medicine, like, if you had to logic out something that's simple all the time, it's just not efficient. So it's
Yeah.
better for your brain to be able to develop to just go, nope, and then just go about your day and just do something else. So
Yeah.
so that's sanctity and degradation. Authority and subversion is another kind of moral flavor that's about respecting dominance and respecting hierarchies and being willing to participate in hierarchies.
And subversion, that's like,
Submission.
okay.
Yeah, authority and submission.
Okay.
So so being willing to have a mentor that tells you what to do and you listen,
Mhm.
or being comfortable having someone you mentor and telling them what to do and they listen, that's an example of being willing to play out that moral flavor
Yeah.
of authority and subversion.
Okay.
And then loyalty and betrayal. This is obviously something, we'll get political on the second one, more political. But this is something that you can obviously see in conservatives. There's a lot of people on the left that have kind of given up or maybe grown out of the idea of being patriotic to the country.
Yeah.
Like, they just think like, well, all living things are important, or the whole planet is important, or whatever. They don't feel like the moral need to rep a team. Like, this is my team as opposed to your team that's different. And so loyalty generally includes like some excluded group in addition to your included group. And so while liberals would emphasize empathy for all things,
Yeah.
conservatives would emphasize loyalty to your team as opposed to other teams.
Yeah.
And so emphasizing those different flavors of morality can make them land on different sides. And I don't think
those
there's
both very much feel like good position.
Really
they're like
good.
good-hearted positions.
Yeah, really good. And truthfully, if you see an American flag flying, you're 80% sure they're voting for Trump. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's because people who vote for Trump love America more. I think it's because people who vote for Trump think that it's more important to rep your team as opposed to other
Interesting.
teams.
Yeah.
And liberals are more just like, all human beings are important, all living things are important. Like, let's treat the planet better. This is not about our team, it's about everybody.
Yeah.
You know? And so there's something really noble about both of those positions. Like,
Absolutely.
no, I'm not going to fly my flag, because flying my flag is almost saying America's a better country than other countries, you know?
Yeah.
And then conservatives might look at it and be like, well, not represent your country. Why would you not be proud of your community? You know, there's this value in us having this camaraderie. And
Yeah.
so I don't, and I've heard liberals say the American flag is associated with racism because people who fly American flags vote for Trump and Trump's racist. Well, I agree Trump's racist. I agree people who fly American flags are more likely to vote for Trump, but that doesn't prove that America is racist, because American flags are associated with racism because they're associated with Trump voters, and you associate Trump voters with racism. Like, it's such a leap there.
Yeah.
That's not an honest explanation for it. That's a let me wave people away and justify why I'm better than kind of explanation. It's
Yeah.
a justification, not an explanation.
Agreed.
The explanation is that they value camaraderie more than they value compassion, and you value compassion more than you value camaraderie.
Yeah.
And love you both. You know, you're both
Yeah.
great.
Pride in your team is more of a conservative value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fairness and cheating. Having a good grasp on this morality, on this aspect of morality, is demonstrated by being able to reap benefits in a two-way relationship. Being able to have partnerships with people that you both benefit from,
Mhm.
and you're both honest with each other, and you both play by whatever rules you establish. That's about fairness and cheating. And I personally don't see a huge emphasis from either side. There's as far as liberals and conservatives go, it's plenty conservative and it's plenty liberal to point out cheating, you know. And it seems to be that it's their job to point out the other side's cheating. It's liberals' job to point out conservative cheating, and it's conservatives' job to point out liberal cheating.
Sure.
I think it'd be better if it was liberals' job to point out liberals cheating and conservatives' jobs to point out conservative cheating. I think that'd be a lot more effective.
Yeah.
But at least everybody's getting checked, right? So
True.
fuck it. And then care and harm is the most basic one. It's the aspect of morality that is most commonly credited with all morality by philosophers. Everything comes down to this. But I don't think that it's true. Care
But
and harm.
if you had to pick one, definitely that is the one that feels the most basic to me. Don't do anything that would hurt anybody else.
It's not to me. Fairness and cheating is to me.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm fine with harming somebody. In plenty of circumstances, I'm fine with harming somebody. You know, I'm fine with giving a kid a shot. You know, I'm fine with calling somebody out on something they don't want to hear. I'm fine
Yeah.
with hurting myself by being honest about something I don't want to. Like life to me does not seem like avoiding harm. It seems like trying to be as fair and honest as possible is what it seems more like it's about to me.
Yeah.
So,
You know, you convinced me. I agree.
but you could still boil that down and say, like, if you call me out and you say, Travis, you've been really arrogant lately, and you know that's going to hurt my feelings, you're only doing it because it'll prevent more harm for me in the future. So
Right.
I feel like since all of and this is actually a point where I disagreed with Haidt. He said that all morality couldn't be boiled down to one aspect of morality, and I thought he was wrong, because all morality could be boiled down to one aspect of morality, but it wouldn't be a very smart game to play. I don't think it's a smart game to play to say all morality boils down to one aspect of morality. I think that different aspects of morality operate as a functional web that all tie into each other,
Mhm.
so that each one makes the other better. Like, if in the same sense that I think that that God is perfect truth and God is also perfect love. When I'm trying to have a truthful conversation with somebody, like for that reason, calling somebody out, I think about it first. I go, is it truthful and is it loving? Because if I say something loving but it's not truthful, it's not really loving. If I say something truthful but it's not loving, it's not really truthful. Like if I just sit someone down and say like, hey, guess what, dude? You're a fuckhead. You know? Like, well, it's true. They've been a total fuckhead. It's like, but it's not constructive and it's not loving, and that's not real truth. You know, even if I think it's accurate,
Mhm.
it's not truth, like with a capital T, if it's not loving. If I sit someone down and say, generally you have all these positive qualities. In this situation, I saw this negative one. It contradicted what I normally know about you. And then I look at him like, is it truthful? Yes. Is it loving? Yes. I'm going to go with it.
Mhm.
And so I think the same thing about morality, that being truly loyal, being truly valuing of authority, being truly sacred, avoiding contaminants, being truly fair, being truly caring, that you could make the argument that they all boil down to any one of them. You'd say, well, that's not really loyal because it's not caring, and that's not really avoiding contamination because it's not really preventing harm, and all these things. Like, the contamination one is a little funky because it relates directly to physical contamination. But I just think that you could play that game where you take any of them and you say, well, it all boils down to this. Especially with the care harm thing, I think you could take all of these and you could boil them down to caring or harming. But it's like, what's your point? It's an interesting thought experiment to do, but I don't think that as a philosopher, boiling down 5 aspects of morality to one actually equips people to live more moral lives or makes a point that's actually beneficial.
Right.
So,
I mean, you want to make the rules as few as possible, but not if that means sacrificing functionality of the rules.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like Nietzsche's criticism of philosophers, they're trying to make a point for their own ego. They're trying to they have a worldview and they're promoting it for their own ego. They're just saying, listen to my mixtape. Listen to my mixtape. Listen to my mixtape.
Yeah.
This is my idea. This is my idea. This is my idea. It's not about truth, because the really great philosophers like Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, they didn't even write things down. They just walked around and talked, and then people just recorded what they said. Like, I think there's something about real truth that's not something that you want to promote. It's just because it already is. It's just truth just already is what it is. So when you really know the truth, I don't think you feel the need to, like, hey guys, like, write the truth down, take it wherever, because I think it's just like I think there's something to that, why the Buddha and Socrates and Jesus they weren't authors. They didn't write. People recorded what they said. I think there's something to that, and that whenever you want to promote an idea on purpose, there's always something about it that's bullshit. And so, as a podcaster, I'm a bullshitter, full time. Like, there's nothing necessary about what I say. It's all, the truth is still going to be the truth before and after I say anything. But if I can say things that better equip people to experience the truth or entertain people, then fine. But nobody is like some wielder of the truth, that if it weren't for, I have to defend the truth. I have to. So I think there's just something stupid about playing that game, where you say, this one value, this is really it. Let me tell you my theory. It's all about this one value. Now let me justify that and link all the other values to mine.
I have heard a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's a silly game, but it's not necessarily wrong. So Hume's like, I don't think that his comparison about the salty sweet thing is totally fair, because salty and sweet are two completely different things. Care and fairness, that's not salty and sweet. Those are not two contradictory flavors. This is something you could boil care down to fairness. You could boil fairness down to care if you wanted to. But
yeah.
But I do think that Haidt's model of laying out these different aspects of morality and then describing why people in different cultures emphasize different ones is really smart, because it's a way of inviting you out of your own matrix and into a matrix where you analyze perhaps your own matrix and someone else's matrix at the same time. It's a way of encouraging the reader to get on the balcony to look down at morality rather than see morality from their own perspective. So that's the end of the first half.
It's awesome. It's good shit.
Good shit.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else.
Nice. Hour 23, my longest one yet.
Dope.
Let's get out of here.
All right.
Night school. Good game.
Good game.